Hello, and thank you for joining us today, and welcome to this session on diary studies. It's fantastic to have so many people registered for this webinar, and as attendees, you're going to be on mute, and you'll only be able to see Julie, Zoe, and me, and nobody else will be able to see you, so it doesn't matter if you are eating or having a cup of tea or whatever. Well, we've got a fair bit to talk about today, but we don't want to sit here talking into the void. We would really like to hear from you as well. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a chat window, and it'd be fantastic if you could tell us where you're joining from today and say hello to everybody. So for those of you who haven't heard of Bunnyfoot, we're all about evidence-driven user experience design. We're a family of 40-odd specialist consultants and practitioners from across the UK, and we've been providing UX strategy, research, and design globally for 22 years. And we work with a lot of amazing clients like you. So now for the obligatory introductions. Julie, Zoe, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Just so everybody knows, we have a little bit of a technical thing today, so I'm moving two slides at once. So if I pause awkwardly, then that is on purpose. My name is Julie Zoe, and I'm a senior UX consultant and sustainability officer at Bunnyfoot, and I've been here for about 7 years. I teach the user testing course at Bunnyfoot, and I lead all sorts of projects from diary studies to user testing, surveys to workshop, strategic work to product evaluation, all depending on what client work comes in. And the most recent clients I've worked with include World Animal Protection and BT. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, JC. And I better introduce myself. So my name is Hugo Nichols, and I'm also a UX consultant, and I've been at Bunnyfoot since 2018. I'm one of the trainers, and I do client work as well, and I focus on all manner of things like interviews and surveys. I do a lot of usability testing, card sorting, tree testing, and expert evaluations. So as I mentioned, I teach a couple of courses. I teach our Fundamentals of UX and Human-Centered Design course, and also a course on designing for usability and human perception. So what will we be talking about today? Well, to provide a bit of context to this talk, I'm going to tell you about what diary studies are and when it may be a good idea to use one. And then we'll look at how to go about setting one up, and very importantly, what to avoid doing. We have made the mistakes, so you don't have to. And then we'll share some recommendations on how to get the best out of your participants as a moderator. And if that wasn't enough, we'll then look at how to get the most out of the data you've collected, before finally having an opportunity for you to ask us any questions you may have. Now, please don't wait until the end to ask your questions. If a bright idea comes up or a burning question, just type them into the Q&A panel as we go along, which is just next to the chat. And if you think that someone has asked a particularly good question, or it was a question that you were going to ask, you can upvote their question instead of rephrasing it. And what will happen is that the questions that have the most votes will rise to the top, and they stand a much better chance of being answered. So let's have a look at what diary studies are. Well, Bunnyfoot defines diary studies as user diaries that help provide insight into overall behavior and experience. This method involves participants recording specific events, feelings, or interactions in a diary supplied by the researcher. So in essence, during a diary study, you are asking a group of representative users to provide details about each time they use the product or service you're researching over a specified time frame. So that's what a diary study is. But there are so many UX research methodologies out there, and why would you decide to run a diary study when you could do interviews or surveys, for example? Well, let's have a look. Well, the best research methodology is usually the one that gives you the data you need for the project when taking into account any constraints you may have, such as time, budget, and where you are in the human-centered design process. So let's have a look at 3 scenarios where it could be valid to run a diary study. So first up, we have when clients or key stakeholders have asked for a longitudinal, contextual, or ethnographic study. All right, let's strip away the jargon for a minute. The first point is just saying that a diary study may be appropriate when clients or stakeholders want to observe a sample of their customers over a long or longer period of time, and when you need to understand your users' overall behavior and routines in their natural environment. That basically means not in a lab, with varying levels of moderator input. And the second point says here that you can also use a diary study when you need to observe actual behaviors rather than what your customers say they're doing. All right, and what do I mean by that? Okay, well, we're actually going to do a quick poll for this. And it's just for fun. I'm going to ask you to be really honest. No one is going to see your answers. There's like no judgment here. And I'm going to poll it right now. It should come up on your screen. I want to know, have you ever been less than 100% truthful on a formal survey about your health? You know, often you can be asked, you know, like, how many units of alcohol do you drink a week? Or, you know, do you ever eat fast food more than once a month? Do you smoke? That kind of stuff. So I would just like you to answer this if you feel like taking part, or skip it if you don't want to. Now, there's a little delay for the results to come in. So in the meantime, another example of you know, saying one thing and doing another would be, have you ever been asked why you did something? That could be by a friend or a partner or a colleague, and then you make up the reasoning on the spot because, frankly, you've just got no idea why you did it. Well, if you've ever done that, I'm happy to tell you you're an entirely normal human being, because as humans, we post-rationalize our decisions and we give answers that represent who we would like to be rather than who we are, warts and all. So just looking at the poll results now, 80% of you have said, yes, you have totally been liberal with the truth when answering questions about your health. So that is massively statistically significant, people bending the truth. And a diary study can help you get around that quirk of human nature, where we're not always totally honest, because participants upload information as they go about their daily lives, and it's relatively easy to tell little white lies are one-off on a medical questionnaire, but it's much harder to convincingly keep faking activity, you know, fake activity over a week or two. Admittedly, in unusual cases, you do get the odd faker, but we'll get to this later and how you can avoid it. And so let's look at the third point here, and this is a really important one. It's to confirm or disprove the clients' or stakeholders' hypotheses around customer experience. And this is most often why we do diary studies. Well, what does it actually mean in practice? Well, we live in a world of big data, and we as human beings and customers are the subject. So companies have got vast amounts of information on us all, on what we do pretty much all day, every day. But while companies know what we're doing, they often don't know why we're doing it. So for example, if your TV has been showing Peppa Pig for 6 hours straight, is it that your kid has been glued to the telly while you've been relaxing with a few glasses of wine, or has the TV just been left on by accident and there's actually no one watching it at all? Well, diary studies can provide the information such as where and when customers consume product and services, and most importantly, why they're doing so. And in doing so, this huge amount of qualitative data that's generated by a diary study can be really useful to help create detailed personas. So those are 3 really good reasons why you might want to use a diary study. So like everything in life, they're not perfect. They are a hugely powerful tool, and you can get unparalleled insight into your customers, how they live their lives. So the good things are that you just get a really natural overview of a user's behavior in their natural environment. Sometimes when you're doing research in a lab, it can feel a little bit fake if you've got a researcher looking over your shoulder or talking to you, taking notes. Whereas if you're at home, you're much more likely to go about your business as usual. They also allow you to uncover behavior that isn't easily visible to outsiders and that may be missed in an interview. So when you're conducting an interview with someone, you can ask them a question and they will just have the first bit of information that comes into their mind at that moment in the interview. But they may actually behave slightly differently if they're in a different scenario at home. So it's really good just to get that natural behavior rather than just asking them to recall what's in their mind in an interview. It's also less intrusive than observation or shadowing. As I mentioned, a person standing next to you with a clipboard is a bit off-putting. And also ethnographic apps make it really easy to collect and tag data digitally. It's much easier than in a written diary like we used to use in the old days. And finally, you can have a huge geographical spread. You know, you can do a diary study with people all over the world very easily. However, they're not to be used all the time, as they have some various drawbacks. So you can see that they are actually one of the most expensive forms of research. And that's because the hours are pretty long in a diary study. They can be sort of 7 a.m. until midnight, and you often need a couple of people to work on them to split the load. So one person to do the morning session and a bit of the afternoon, and another person to do the evening. And also they can generate a massive amount of data, so it's nice to have two people involved to try and make sense of it all. But two people means twice the staff cost. The process can also take a really long time due to recruitment and participant hand-holding. You want to be absolutely sure you get the right people, and you need to be absolutely sure you've explained exactly what they need to do, and that's pretty time-consuming. You can also miss the chance to follow up on some really interesting posts if the tool you use for the diary study doesn't allow you to interact with the participants. Also, you never know what's happening at the other end with the participants. They might have terrible Wi-Fi. They might not really understand technology very well, and that can cause issues. And finally, you can occasionally get unmotivated participants who have signed up just for the cash and aren't really that engaged. And that means you're going to get less data from them. So you now, at this point, have perhaps decided that a diary study really is the right tool for the job, and it's going to get the data that you need, and you have got the resources to run it effectively. Well, what do you do to get started? Well, it's good to begin by asking yourself some basic questions to get an idea of the parameters of your study. So first off, who are you going to study? So as with any research, getting the right participants is absolutely key to getting the data you need to base your design, business, and further research decisions on. So once you've had to think about who you're going to include in the diary study, you need to think, well, how long are we going to run it for? You know, is this going to be a one-day diary study? And we've used those occasionally if we're very short of time, but you just want to get a sense of a participant's sort of total day. So in that example, we give the participant a task to do, like please log all your interactions with technology you have in a day and how you feel and why. But these sort of one-day studies are much less commonly requested than a study lasting a week or perhaps two, which give just a huge amount of data, including any variation in behavior on weekdays and how that compares to weekends. And of course, then the longer the study, the more expensive they can be. So budget is also a deciding factor in how long the diary study lasts. You also need to have a think about if it's going to be unmoderated or moderated. So an unmoderated study is when the participant is just set a brief at the beginning of the study, and then the researcher just leaves them to it for the desired amount of time. Whereas a moderated study, the researcher will prompt the participants either through an ethnographic tool or a platform or any other digital means to give them tasks to complete during the study or ask them to provide certain information about their habits. And we're going to look at a few of those options later. You also need to think about if it's going to be a digital study. You can opt for a pen and paper study. That was sort of the original way of doing them, whereby as the researcher, you would sort of send out paper-based diaries with tasks to do in them, and then ask the participants to record their feelings, their experiences and emotions when completing them. But these days, there are so many digital tools to choose from. So you might use a dedicated ethnographic tool, which is usually a mobile app. And we actually have used many of these, and we use different ones for different scenarios. But what all of these have in common is that they allow the researcher to see uploads in real time that participants make from an app on their phone. And participants just can upload videos, photos, audio recordings, and then also comment on them. And this allows the researcher to chat directly with them about each upload in a comments field if they need more information. So there are some quite good things to be considering quite early on in the process of preparation. And now I want to ask you guys a question, and I'm going to put it here in the Q&A. So can you give me a reason why a participant may not want to use a mobile ethnographic app for a diary study and instead use other forms of communication like good old-fashioned phone call or email instead? So I've put that in the Q&A, and feel free to add any answers to that and upvote any that you think sound sensible to you, and we'll look at those answers in a bit. So the next thing that you need to bear in mind after you've got the sort of basic guideline of how the practicalities will work for your diary study, you need to think carefully about what you want to discover during the study. So we have in most recent years worked with sort of big projects across media and energy companies. And while they all wanted to run diary studies about their customers, each study was designed to cover very different things. So we've all got really busy lives. We all do a lot in a week. There's a huge amount of data that can be collected about people's lives. And it is essential to know exactly what you want to capture before you go any further. So this means conversations with your clients or stakeholders to ensure that you are all on the same page about what you want to find out. Because the last thing you want to do is to spend all this time and effort and money and then not be able to use the data you've collected. Also, when clients or stakeholders realize just how much they can find out about their customers, there is a real danger of scope creep. So you need to make sure everyone is clear of the project parameters so you don't get an overwhelming amount of data at the end and no clear direction of how it'll be used. So in short, spending time here will ensure you're going to get what you need, and it will make a huge difference to the success or the failure of the project. So, there we are. So it's also worth noting that the diary study may well not be a one-off piece of research. It may be part of a wider program and be informed by surveys or be followed up with interviews. And here we have a slide taken from a report showing some work we did for an energy company about their customers' attitudes towards energy and their energy-related habits. And if you look at the numbers at the bottom of the slide, combined methodologies generate a lot of data. And that is amazing for your clients and stakeholders, but it can leave you wondering how it'll all be put into a digestible format. But fear not, Jay-Z is going to tell you how to do that in a little while. So, when you are crystal clear on what insights you need to find out, you need to ensure you have the right cross-section of customers represented in your participant list. So you need to consider the people that you want to observe. You need to think about which demographics and behaviors are essential to be represented in your study. Because once the study is live, you do not want to be adding people in. So this is a really key part of the process. And it can be really helpful at this point to talk to a wide variety of stakeholders if you don't have this information. Everyone from marketing to customer service agents to product owners and even legal. And here we have got an anonymized list of households we recruited for an energy company. And you can see there's just a good split of profiles, which overall represented their major customer groups. It's also important to get a good mix of geographical location to avoid regional bias, especially if you're doing global research, and also consider any technical or knowledge-based differences between your customers. Some may be like power users and know the product backwards, and others are just casual users. So just make sure that all the key groups and behaviors are represented, or you're going to have holes in your data at the end of the project. And at this point, there's a question of how you go about getting the quality participants that you need. Well, this really depends on what resources you have. You may be lucky to have an in-house team or the budget to hire specialists such as Bunnyfield, and this is our sister company. And we and our clients are super lucky to work with them. And you can see the numbers speak for themselves. So there's about 20,000 participants on the database. And they're all great candidates, and there's an unrivaled no-show rate, and they can do everything for you. And so if you ever need any help finding great people for research, they're a brilliant place to start. Plus, they're also very lovely people, which is a major bonus when you're doing work with anyone. So let's just have a look at some good practice and pitfalls for doing recruitment. It's important that you get your criteria approved for the participants ASAP and start the process in good time, because it does take quite a long time for larger studies. This isn't people committing to an hour of their time. It can be up to 2 weeks, so start early. Also, as any good researcher will know, you've got to brief the participants thoroughly. You have to explain to them exactly what they need to do throughout the project and take them through the technology a bit. And that includes both a briefing call and also a debriefing call to catch up on any information you might have missed during the project. Some warnings here. Some people are probably going to lie to you in the screener. And you need to do your due diligence here. So, asking participants to confirm who lives in their household, so you don't have random people turning up that they've never mentioned. And also, some participants may sort of pretend to be doing slightly different routines than normal. We have also had a slightly special example where someone has pretended to be their identical twin to get double the incentive. So whilst you can't be totally sure that everyone is honest, if you use an established fieldwork company, that can help, because they can blacklist people who bend the truth so they don't get considered for future research. So the next thing that you need to do is to choose the most suitable diary study tool to gather the data. And it's really worthwhile making sure that the tool meets the needs of your participants, because the easier you make the process of providing data, the more keen participants will be to provide it. And if it is a massively complicated and laborious process to upload video, it might put people off, especially if they're super busy and they want to capture just a spur of the moment insight. And that will mean you'll get less data. So everyone will benefit if you pick a tool that works for your participants. And here are a few options. There's lots out there like Ethos and Demo and Live Data. If you don't have budget for those, they are quite expensive. There are lots of free alternatives like the telephone, SMS, WhatsApp, voice messages, and all that sort of thing. So we mentioned a bit earlier about why some people might want to use one of these apps, and there's lots of very sensible answers, and quite a few of them are around privacy, GDPR. If you were a good company, you should definitely be abiding by the GDPR, so privacy shouldn't be such an issue, and all participants would sign a consent form saying that their data can be used strictly for the purposes of the research. Nervous about how the app works and doing something wrong and having the digital skills to do so, that's absolutely right, and those are really good points. But one of the main reasons to consider using alternatives to a research app is due to some of them not being coded well enough for people with disabilities to use with ease. And, why is that important? Well, as you can see, over 12 million people in the UK have a disability, and that statistics should make it really clear how important it is to consider accessibility during your research, including any diary studies you run, because many of your users will have some kind of impairment. It's also the right thing to do to consider accessibility and a legal requirement to make reasonable adjustments to ensure your products and services are accessible due to the Equality Act 2010. So it's very valuable to include participants with access needs, some of which are listed on this slide here. So they may be keyboard-only users or have a cognitive disability, be deaf or hard of hearing, blind, partially sighted, or have limited mobility or dexterity. And just on that note, when doing diary studies with disabled participants, we recommend offering the participant their preferred method of communication so that you don't make demands that will inconvenience them. Diary studies, like all research, should be a really positive experience for everyone involved, and they will enjoy the study and you'll get the insights you need if you look after them properly. So one thing to bear in mind also, if you're choosing a digital diary, is to meet or arrange a call with your chosen provider and make sure they have a digital support for both you and your participants. Now, ideally, that includes a conversation about how accessible the app is or not. For example, one ethnographic app we use isn't WCAG compliant and doesn't work with screen readers, so it was unusable for an accessibility diary study we ran recently. And you just need to know this kind of detail well before you start the study, as when it's up and running, it is too late to change. So good technical support is important. Also, because of the duty of care you have towards your participants. If your participants are really stressed because they can't work the app, it's not good for anyone because it'll degrade their quality of life during the study and can impact the validity of your data as they're acting under pressure. So technical support is very important for you and your participants to turn to if there are any technical issues. So then, it's important to do a bit of a test version because all ethnographic apps work a bit differently, and it'll help you know when to spend a bit of time playing around with its various features. And the best way to do that is to set up a test study, upload some of the data yourself so you know what it's like for participants who are going to do it, and to see what the uploads look like as they come in. So let's quickly look at an example dashboard. So this is the dashboard for Ethos. There are lots of other ethnographic apps available. And I've just uploaded a few pictures and videos here about my coffee and TV watching routine. And you can see I've put an arrow there. You've got the ability to add tags to the various uploads, which Julie Zoe is going to talk about in just a minute. And there's an option to probe the participant for more information about their post. And this is where ethnographic apps can help, as you have all the data in one place and you can tag and probe as you go through the study, so you don't have all the analysis to do at the end of the project, which may give you a serious headache with so many data points. So if you do decide to use other forms of communication, like phone and text, it's worth finding a place where you can store and tag all the data, so it's all in one place, because that will just make it much easier for the analysis later on. Now, I have talked enough, and at this stage, I've got you to the point where you know what you want to get out of the study, you've got your participants lined up, you're set up with your test project, and you know the software. What is next? Here is Julie Zoe to tell you.
Thank you so much, Hugo. Yeah, so we're now going to look at the diary study and what it would actually look like from a participant's point of view, and how we kind of got there. I mean, we've kind of been through it already, but here it is again from a different perspective. It's important to remember that the tasks a participant will have to log or is asked to do are a mix between objectives and how the researchers think best to gain that information. So objectives meaning what the stakeholders have asked to find out. I've not come across many projects where the stakeholders object or lead the tasks, but I have come across often that you have to explain the nature of the tasks and the level of involvement that you can have with the participant, like Hugo has already spoken about, that the things that they do might be framed in a certain way, because we have less variables that we can control. Instead of being able to interject and kind of correct understanding as you would be able to if you were sat next to them in a usability testing and then in an artificial environment, we can only observe and ask questions on the data that is actually given. So if a participant is interacting with an app and we are interested in logging that in the tool, and we can't ask them to look at something else as well. We can only ask about the thing that they are doing in that moment. Otherwise, that would be leading them, and it might lead them to abnormal behavior, which is not what we want from a diary study. So to prepping tasks and making sure they're ready to use is basically in framing things to do or homework, if you like, that they will have to undergo during their weeks of study. So what would a prep task look like? A list of, it could just be a list of things. You can open the tool. It could be a list of things that I would have to go through, which ideally would have been agreed between client and the research agency beforehand. So when the researcher is prepping the participants, they've got a clear idea of what this homework will look like. It could be a list of questions that the participant have to answer at various times of the day or week. It could be a prompt that gets sent to them at random times where they have to log behavior, mood, feeling, tech used, etc. And it could be an agreement that another participant would post about something before, during, or immediately after interacting with the client's product, service, tech, interest area, etc. Or most likely it's a mix of all of the above, and it is our job to sit there and figure out what that right mix is of homework. And as a side note, if you're worried about like what that would look like with a participant, we've made a little storyboard later on that I'll walk you through so you get a little feel for that. But as a kind of top tip, usually the tasks and homework that we set are matched to the tone of voice of the participant. So when you are moderating through the tool, if they're using lots of emojis and exclamation points and they are, very enthusiastic about the task that they're doing, we will probably try and match their enthusiasm. Likewise, if they're, being a bit more reserved, we will try and match that as well to not lead them too much through these tasks. And then, sorry, I'm doing the 2-slide change with Hugo. Did so smoothly, so I don't know how he did that. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to do a dry run before going live. So there you can see a pattern here, like you test the tool, you test the the perception and the tasks being done, you test everything basically. I mean, hey, we're a research company, so we would preach that naturally. But just like a user guide in a usability testing study that you might be used to, or a survey, you would test the perception of what a participant is about to do to make sure that they have no barriers to success when the study goes live. So I also highly recommend, in terms of the IT support, in testing your study, I recommend you start your diary studies on a Monday. I have yet to find an ethnography tool that gives you IT support over the weekend. So, shout out there to that. But yeah, it's basically just to uncover anything you don't want the participant to struggle with during the study itself. And when I say that, I mean, it doesn't have to be recruited for specifically. I mean, ideally, would love to have participants that have been recruited in to kind of do a dry run of the study, but you can also pretty please ask people internally that hasn't been so involved in the project, or close people to you, to kind of just have a go and see if the questions make sense, if the tasks make sense, and if the tool makes sense, to kind of nip anything in the bud that might be a barrier to success for the participant later on. So to kind of give you, because a lot of people that we work with, they're a bit worried about what the participant would go through and how much they are led or not led, and what kind of data comes in and why it could be so sporadic and or different. And so we decided, instead of showing you lots of different bits from lots of different projects that had to be anonymized, which just proved very confusing, we thought we'd just make you a very sort of standard day in the life of Jamie, which is Jamie, and obviously she's a fully abled person, no impairments that we know of, and is highly experienced in using technology. So that's being said, I've not put in any extras on that. But yeah, Jamie, a day in the life of, is an account executive at the public relations company and a firm believer that they need to be updated on the news. Not only is it crucial to her work, but it's also something that she got taught as values when she was younger, that if you weren't updated on the news, then, you're a little bit lazy. So being well informed is really important to her. And this makes her an ideal candidate for this hypothetical diary study that we have run, which, is all around the daily news consumption of our participants. So Jamie was briefed by a researcher very thoroughly. She got introduced to the tool. She got introduced to what it might look like. She got onboarded to the process of how, when, and what we would like her to post, and ideally how much. Again, that is all decided with the client beforehand. And after that detailed briefing, when she opens the app on her first day, she will see a list of tasks to be completed. And there's also 2 introductory tasks for her to do straight away. And very often now, this is quite common, the ethnographic tools that we get access to, they will have selfie videos, they will have screen recording, you can live tag, there'll be transcripts if any videos are uploaded. So as part of her introductory setup to this diary study, she would be asked to do an introductory selfie video explaining her motivation to take part and the reason she keeps up with the news. And also, again, to Hugo's point, we know what and when because of all analytics and that your phone tracks everything about you, but we don't actually know why. So sometimes we need more context, and clients these days very often want to know, like, what's their house like, what's the environment that they're in, where are they using this technology, and why. So as an introductory task could be take a series of photos of your house, explaining the layout and all the places that you might read the news. You could also add on, who lives in your household, take a picture of them, just to kind of get a bit more of an enriched view of them as a person. So she wakes up, and as she's woken up, as part of her briefing, she was told that every time she checks the news, she has to log it. So she opens up in Demo and she takes a selfie, adds a note about what where she is, what she's feeling, and why she's using the app right now. And then when he moves on to breakfast, she does the same. She sat there with her partner and dutifully fills in an observation that she's on the app at that point in time, and she's including any relevant feelings. Commuting to work, she might be killing time. She might be watching a little bit of Netflix and reviewing some client competitors on the news. Again, she logs that as instructed. And then, she's been at work for a little while, and all of a sudden a message pops up. So this is what we would call an experience sample. Sometimes there isn't a task set, and sometimes she might not be doing anything that she needs to log, but we've maybe agreed with the client beforehand that we wanted a realistic, day in the life of. So we would send her a prompt saying, hey, what are you doing right now? Tell us, and take a picture. And that would give us a realistic, I'm not using technology right now, but I'm sat at work doing this and this. And give us a realistic view of their context throughout today. And then having lunch, maybe on average, she spends about a 30-minute conversation with her colleagues. And then just after that, she might be logging into her apps again, looking at the news. And again, dutifully, she would log into the Demo app. And what she actually sees is that there is a notification there. Some ethnographic tools allow you to speak to them live, hence why we moderate live quite a few of our studies. And like Hugo said, they can be long days because you have to be online when they're online, and people are online all the time. So yeah, she might be talking about something, and me as a moderator might be interested in the motivation behind it or digging a little bit more. So I'll ask her a question and she can reply to it. And then, commuting home, an example of where she might not log something. You might not get any data then because she physically is not able to reach her phone at that point in time, and she's not looking at the news. She might just be, popping into the shops to get some dinner on the way home. And then while she's preparing dinner, Jamie was asked to log anytime she watched news outside of using this news app as well. So while she's preparing dinner, And before her partner gets home, she maybe leaves the telly on for company in the background, and while she's prepping her meal, and she sees the notification that the researchers asked a further question about this behavior, but she can decide to reply later. And the reason I put that in there is because sometimes you'd be sat there moderating, but they don't have time to talk to you right then. They might be busy with something else. So you have to patiently wait to see if they remember what they were doing and if they want to reply, which most of the time they do. And then, whilst eating dinner, maybe they're doing that thing where they're arguing about something and they can't remember what it was, that they're going to look it up on their phone. And she logs that in her app as well. And at the same time, she replies to the question from before. And in bed for the night, they have decided that the big TV or the big screen goes to her partner. She's not that bothered. She wants to go to bed. So she's just finishing up, whatever she was looking at on her phone in bed. And then she would go to sleep. That's the end of her day. And also, as a moderator, that would be the end of my day. If everybody went to bed at the same time, of course, which nobody does. So you sit there in the dark on your own until everybody's gone to bed. But that being said, just as kind of a summary, you can see why some of these things are so sporadic and so throughout the day, and it creates so many data points. And every time you ask a question, that would be a new data point. And it's such rich data because they are self-reporting and they're taking pictures and it's in the moment. There's very little that we can control in terms of the data that comes in. However, it is very it's digging very deep into their actual behavior, which is something that all research strives for, right? Because you want the truth and you want evidence-based design. So that's part of, you can clearly see my passion for them. That's why I love them. So how to analyze this, right? I was at a project and I had 4,875 individual data points from 3 different ways of doing it in the diary study, and you're kind of sat there going, whoa, like what do I do now? Like, somebody's just thrown up Post-it notes all over a wall and I'm supposed to make sense of it. Well, luckily, these ethnographic tools have already thought about it. And here are some things that are good to do and some things that we have learned along the way not to do. So just look at the main tags that you made throughout the diary study and see what big themes speak to you. And usually that's a good thing for analysis anyway, right? If you feel lost, you look at the data and you think, what are the big things that I remember? Or what are the tags that came up the most? No matter what it was, ignore the spelling mistakes. I know I have them. And what was the tag that kind of stood out to you, and start there. And then you summarize I had to do this with 47 different households. And I was like, oh, how am I going to make sense of all them together? I just summarized the top 3 things per participant or household. Sometimes we have a whole house that we're tracking, and what were the big 3 things per household that I could remember. And that way I actually then are narrowing down my data to really look at the big themes. Again, it's all about kind of affinity mapping everything and prioritize findings from the big themes. So even finding big themes can create quite a lot of data points. And then you have to go, what is important to the objective of this project? What is it that the stakeholders wanted to know? What is the truth that I have seen, right? You're not making up stuff. It's just what you've seen. And what do they need to see first is also, something that you might want to take a first stab at, because not everything is super important to the strategies or new products or services that they want to launch. However, some pitfalls. Don't go through all the data piece by piece. Trust me, that generates a lot. It generates a lot of data, and it's going to take way too much time. Just like we say in user testing courses, you don't re-watch the whole session. Like, it takes too much time. Don't let the data overwhelm you. Like, you can tell I've been overwhelmed several times in my life. 10 years of this, and I'm still sat there at the beginning of analysis going, they didn't say anything, but they did. And although you are allowed a bit of freak out time there, that's a bit of a notion to myself. Start going through the big themes and, see where your memory takes you and take it from there. So what the data can look like I just said, it can be tagging as you go along. It can be transcripts of videos. It can be filtering by it can be demographics that you've logged, you know, as they're going. It can be digital behaviors. The reason I say and much more is because it depends a little bit on your moderating style, what you're engaging with the participants with, what the objectives were in the beginning, and the tags you had already prepared, and the tags that came up naturally. So, you know, that is what the data can look like. And just to zoom in a little bit, this is a dashboard for Indemo, and this is where we just highlighted a bit of the functionalities that Indemo have, and they have even more now. So again, tags, you know, we can ask questions in real time. They can upload videos, and you know, they can upload moments. I mean, when I brief participants, and we brief participants at Bunnyfoot, we normally say, please take a picture with whatever you're uploading, because it gives us so much context. And if people just upload a text, I would normally be a bit cheeky and be like, can I have a picture as well, just to kind of have a little look. And also, pictorial evidence is very easy to spot people who are lying, because, you know, if they're not in the bedroom, then it's pretty easy to tell. If they're not on the train, it's pretty easy to tell. So that's one of my little tips there. And what does the end result look like of a diary study, right? Because all these data points can be so varied. What do they look like? Well, it really depends on what you want out of them. You know, we've had people who just want to know what their users are doing when they're not using their device, or how they're communicating when they're using a certain service, or how do they decide who gets to do what in their household if it's really busy. Like the example here, this was who gets what device when and why. Like, how do they decide that? And again, like Hugo said, if Peppa Pig has been on for 6 hours, why is that? We found out it's because, you know, the younger you are in the household, the more you get control over the bigger TV. So that was why Peppa Pig has been on for 6 hours. But, you know, like in this household, it was people who have several devices in one household. They can switch between them. And if they have older children, like in this instance, there is no struggle anymore. The children have grown up. They have their own devices. So most likely, whoever has the bigger passion for watching the bigger screen gets it. Most of the time, that's live sports, just going to say. But yeah, so it can look like this. It could be literally an overview of how people split their hierarchy of who gets the bigger screen in the house. Or it could be like this, which is a very detailed participant timeline over working day versus non-working day with, with the pink. I can't zoom in here for confidentiality reasons, but, you know, the pink things here are opportunities, are places where you could springboard new strategies and ideas. And we have literally logged them for time of day. So you can probably guess what kind of service it is, but I'm not going to tell you. Or it could look like this. It could be, like Hugo said, it really gives such a rich information to a persona. So if you need some persona work, I mean, diary studies are fantastic, because very often personas are grounded in marketing and or advertising. That's where they came from, right? And you wanted to have a target market, and you wanted to know what like archetype is and things like that. That is all demographics. When you do a diary study, you get behavior, and more likely you would get digital and physical behavior, and which would differ, you know, and you would get a value-based persona as well. You know, you can be old, young, from a different ethnic group, but you might still have the same values, and that's what we're designing to, right? Or you might still have the same behavior on your phone. It might not matter how old you are or that kind of stuff. So so even though that is still in there, if you really wanted sort of true behavior personas, then diary studies are for you. And then that's kind of it. I don't know. When we talk about all of this, I know that might have been a little bit fast, because I tend to speak a little bit fast, and I apologize for that. But you can watch it again and pause it and do whatever you like. If you were a little bit overwhelmed by that, that is okay. We are here to help you out with that, because we do training. So here is an overview of the courses that we do. And I don't know if Hugo, maybe you're a bit more equipped to talk about this new double diamond here that we've introduced.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So this is kind of like I mean, I imagine that some of you are in UX, and if you are designers or researchers in UX, you probably know the double diamond very well. It seems appropriate we have it here. So the way that this sort of this picture breaks down is that the initial sort of overarching course that we offer is the fundamentals of UX and design thinking, or human-centered design, and that's the course that I run. And that really runs all the way from discovery, the research phase, going through to developing ideas, doing some simple design, and then how you go about usability testing. So that's just a one-day course that covers all the basics. But then we have going into much more sort of, I guess, targeted detail. We have everything from an overarching strategy and the fundamentals of service design, right the way through to what the various different user research methods you can use, and testing, journey mapping, and IA work. And then also there's courses about designing for emotion and trust, and the human perception, and including prototyping, practical accessibility. If ever you need to know about anything accessibility, that's a really great course to do, straight through to the other end, which is SEO and analytics. So there's a sort of a full list of courses there. And yeah, if you want to find out more about any of them, all the details are on our website. So do feel free to check it out. There are also a couple of accredited courses that we run. The most popular that we do is the CPUX Foundation, and you get an internationally recognized qualification. And then there is a follow-up course for that, which is the user testing course. So if you're interested in getting a qualification, and then particularly if you really want to start doing usability testing in your organization, the CPUX user testing course is great for that. And again, all the details are on our website. So thank you very much, Jay-Z. Loved your section, and I'm so glad you mentioned about freakouts. I think everyone probably has a freak out now and again when they do some analysis. So let's have a look now at the Q&A, and we will see if we can answer any of your questions for you. So Jay-Z, should we have a look? So the top one I've got is,
I think you'd be the best one to answer this one because you've most recently done it. So
sure. So the question is from Debbie Race. If you are using, say, WhatsApp or email to gather results, have you any recommendations on how to collect all the findings? Would you use Excel or Miro? I see the dedicated tools help with managing the data, but could see it could be overwhelming otherwise. It's a very good question, and I've got a couple of answers for this. One, I have done an example before where I've used an ethnographic tool for most of the participants, but some of the participants had access needs, which meant they couldn't use the research app. So they actually communicated with me either via phone or by email, etc., or by WhatsApp. And so what I did is I created accounts in their name, and I uploaded all of their data to the ethnographic app. So I basically just duplicated their work. So if you can use, most people, you can use the app, but a couple of people can't. You can just create accounts in their name and upload their data, so it's all in one place. I've also used Excel in the past for pasting data, and you could also use Airtable for that. Airtable is also quite good in terms of being able to integrate multimedia. So we generally tend to use the slightly bigger and honestly slightly more expensive solutions like Indemo and Ethos and that kind of stuff, because it makes it easier to manage. But it is definitely possible to use things like Airtable and Excel if you need to. Probably because we use a lot of video, I think Miro could be a bit tricky with that. So I'd probably stick to something that's maybe table based. I hope that answers your question.
I think that's fair. Yeah. And that was
Jay-Z, anything to add?
No, I mean, the only thing that you also could do is this is very rudimental, but I have in the past just created a folder in my email. And then if they're emailing in anything, you can email yourself, can't you? Remember we used to have to do that sometimes, where they would give us something through some kind of technology and we would email ourselves with it and then create a folder in our email with it. But again, that is a very, very crude way of doing it, but it just depends on what kind of, I think a lot of people said, well, what about the technical skills of the participants, etc. So it is kind of what you touched upon now. Yeah, you just have to adapt, don't you, and find a place big enough to hold all of it.
From Claire Unwin, I feel like a DJ. Is the software smart enough to auto tag and find the big themes for you? What I would say about that is there are some uses for AI. For example, some of them create something called a sentiment analysis report, which means that it can pick up if they have like a positive or a negative response to what's happening, and that gives you a little score effectively. So yes, AI can be used to help. I'm not sure I would honestly trust AI to do all of my work for me. I would be very worried that I would be missing out on some stuff. So I would say that it can help, but I wouldn't let it do all the work for you, I'm afraid. So you're probably just going to have to submit to having a minor freak out like most people do, and go with it. And JC just gave some really, really good points about just the main topics that come to mind, because you can get overloaded with data. And I thought that was just a really good advice about how to stay calm in the face of all of that data. Yeah, just look for the big themes are the most important things.
But I think also, even if you are someone who has acquired this piece of work and you are sat there observing, I know that some of the tools that you can use, they will allow you to have an observation view. So you would be able to see data come in live. So again, you can feel overwhelmed on that side, right? Being someone who has said, I want to find out this, and you're watching the moderators and the research happening live. Again, just taking a breath and like, okay, well, what is it that's standing out to me? You know your product service situation better than anyone, and what you're probably picking up on as important is probably important. So like that's kind of what we're doing as well, right? Tagging live, and you can do that too when you're looking at it, or when you get that data given to yourselves. I believe, should we go to the
next question from Elizabeth Nightingale?
Elizabeth Nightingale. How many participants minimum do you recommend for a diary study? Oh, this one's a hard one. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to find out. We've had large studies which are like 47 households to only 5 people for a week. I don't know, Hugo, what do you think? I've never done I gotta say, I've never done a diary study with less than sort of like 10 people, I think.
I've literally just done one with 8 people. So I would say like 8 to 14, maybe, sort of, minimum, somewhere around that, around 10, I would say. But yeah, I mean, I would be absolutely terrified to have 40 people in a diary study, because if they're all uploading at least sort of say 5 to 10 things a day, that might be up to sort of, I don't know, several hundred data points in a day per person. And then you've got to go back to them and say, oh, that's really interesting. Can you say more about this? So that means you could get nearly like 1,000 data points in a day. Yeah. So I would say I would say start off with around 10-ish, give or take a couple. And if you want to do over 20, good luck to your analysis team.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point though, Hugo. Like, you're saying, okay, so I did that, right? It was 47 people, and they were, and it was about 5 times a day. They would all post something, and then you'd ask questions and blah, blah, blah. I think the more people you add to a diary study, and if it is moderated, then the less you will know per entry, because me as one person will not be physically able to kind of dig into every individual one unless I'm doing it in retrospect, which is possible, but will be more time consuming, right? So I just think like the more you add, the less you'll maybe get out of each individual participant. But I wholly stay with you. Like 15 is more than enough to get a good deep insight into what your users are about. If you have like a clear idea of who you want to talk to, of course, and you've recruited the right people.
So, Will Sharp, do you identify data sweet spots where the user is most engaged and truthful? I mean, really, you're there as a moderator to make sure that you're getting the most engaged and truthful responses as possible. And there will just be some quotes and some videos where it just clicks. You just think, that is an incredible insight. And that's part of your job as just an empathetic human being as a researcher. So yeah, that is pretty much your job, is to find the sweet spots where people are really engaged either positively or negatively with the product, and bring that out in the analysis. So yeah, that's a big part of the job.
I think that's also like a point where you say you match the participant, don't you? You match their, you try and match whatever enthusiasm or whatever tone of voice that they are. Obviously, if they're being, if they're offloading and using you as a little bit of a hobby psychologist, you're just empathetic and supportive in there. But yeah, if they're being super enthusiastic and stuff, that can encourage people who might feel uncomfortable sharing to share more. And we did have a question before that I've already answered. We said, well, how comfortable are people sharing? Believe me, they're comfortable. People are so used to posting their lives up online. Like, there is no doubt that people are happy sharing. Like, I have had posts from the loo. I've had posts on like where they've sat and, there are like half naked people in the background and I've had to like blur them out. I was just like, oh, maybe not take pictures of your, wife in her underwear when you're like, that's okay. We don't need to know that. Like, they share a lot. Hence why we have strict GDPR rules so that, we don't get, we keep that on the tabs.
Okay. What other questions have we got? So
Tom K, what are the most common objectives your clients want to know? Or to put it another way, what is realistic objective to get good data from? Good question.
I'd say, what we were talking about, Google Analytics and personas.
Yeah.
I feel like both of those are classic objectives. To explain analytical data or to explain survey data. And I'm just going to tie this in with another question. Linda has asked, what about combining diary study with a quant method like surveys? 100%. Often we will run a survey with several hundred people and we'll bring out some big themes, and then we will use perhaps some of the people from that survey who have, been really high up in, like the bell curve of a particular issue. And then we go and learn about them and their life for a week to put much more, qual data around what we found in the survey. So yeah, 100%. And that's what I was saying, is that, a diary study is often not a standalone piece of research. It's, follows a survey. It is followed up by interviews. So you get this huge amount of data to explain the analytics, to create personas, or whatever it is. So that's my thought anyway, Tom.
Okay, David has given us the last question, Hugo. So you pick the last question.
We've looked at the automatically pulling out themes, haven't we? I don't think so. Would you say that diary studies are the best user research method for building a customer journey map? I would say they are a very good research method for building a customer journey map. You might be able to get away with just watching people in context do a journey. You could just do some field work for that. You can also ask people, you could also build it up from interviews, I would say. Jay-Z, anything else that you would say about that?
I mean, I'd say yes, wouldn't I? Because I love diary studies. So I'd be like, yeah, because I think it's the less intrusive way of finding the truth, right? Because you're not there following them all the time. And even if you were shadowing them and doing some field work, yes, that is less expensive. However, you're spending like the same amount of time, but you're getting less data, because if you're not interjecting or constantly asking them questions, then you're not really going to know why. You're just observing, even though that is really, really helpful. And you can do like a self-reporting afterwards, and you can get them in for use of testing later. I just think diary studies are a very rich way of getting the truth out of how people live their lives. And obviously, yeah, you'll have the odd one who lies or trying to, like live a tidier life than they really do when they're secret hoarders, but you'll spot them and there'll be like one data point in like a horde of them. So it'll still be a really, really good way of getting that information. So I'd say, yes, I think diary studies are a great way of doing that. So yeah, that was the last question, I think.
We're out of time. We're going to be booted off.
And then just to finish up, saying that if anyone needs support on a project like this, then obviously feel free to email us. And if you have any questions, we're well aware that we chatted at you for 50 minutes and that might have been a bit overwhelming. So if you need any clarification or any help, we have our courses and you have our emails, and we're more than happy to have a chat. As you can see, I'm truly biased towards diary studies. So, and Hugo has immense experience in it. So yeah, if you need any help or any questions, then feel free to reach out.
Okay, I think that's probably it, isn't it? So yeah, and then this will, we'll be posting this video online as well, so you can always check back and get any nuggets of wisdom from Jay-Z about diary studies in the future. Alrighty, I think that's all we've got time for today. I hope you had a good time. It was really nice of you all to come here. Thank you so much for your time, and let us know if you need anything about diary studies in the future. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.